Hello and welcome back everyone. In the interim of me playing RuneScape, I decided to try out some new games. Steam just hosted NextFest, a showcase of upcoming games to look forward to. One of the games really caught my eye and I wanted to make an entire video dedicated to that game, but due to some scheduling issues and long queue times, rather than a whole video, it will just be part of it. So instead, this is going to be a new kind of series where I show off some games, their demos potentially, and I put the question to you, my audience, of which will be the next game I play on my channel, or what you think might be interesting to watch in the future. Those gameplay videos will most likely be one-offs, taking a different approach than the regular Let's Plays, but if that is something y'all want to watch instead, just let me know. So let's see what NextFest has to offer. I downloaded 5 demos that looked interesting to me. Fellowship, Asgard's Fall, He Is Coming, Starless Abyss, and Everhood 2, or Squared, I don't know which one it is. I was excited to try these games since I don't really go out of my way too often to try out a whole bunch of new stuff unless it's from a publisher I know I like. So this was a great opportunity to change that. First off, we start with Fellowship. This was the game that I was most excited to try out, the game that I had intended to make an entire video on, but unfortunately I just wasn't able to get the amount of footage or games in that I really needed to make an entire video about it. I logged in, I completed the tutorial, and then I sat in queue for honestly like 15 to 20 minutes. While this queue goes on, I'll explain a little bit about what Fellowship is. Essentially, it is an MMO dungeon simulator. You pick a class of tank, damage, or healer and go through dungeons just like you would in an MMO, without most of the grinding associated with traditional MMOs. To me, this sounded great. I love me a good MMO, and I love the dungeons in there. They're probably my favorite part about those games. But as I sat in queue, I was struck with a realization. One thing about MMOs that make them great is all of that extra content that you can do. Specifically, all the content you can do while you wait in queue. See where I'm going with this. Take for example Final Fantasy XIV, the MMO I have sunk by far the most time into. If for some reason there was a queue for my dungeon, I play healer, so that's not very common, I would maybe go to my private island, do a little bit of Stardew Valleying while I was there, talk to the members of my guild, so there was always something for me to do in that game while I waited. While I was sitting in queue, I did feel like I was missing that aspect from Fellowship. But once I actually got into a dungeon, the game is pretty fun. If you enjoy playing MMOs, I think this game will be pretty well received by you. In the dungeon, there are all the things you would expect to see, from the enemies to the dungeon layouts. Monsters will need to be interrupted so a devastating spell doesn't come through. There are usually packs of mobs that lead you towards the boss and towards your end goal. Tanks need to manage their aggro so that the rest of the party doesn't get hit. DPS need to kill the enemies as fast as possible. And of course, the healer, that's me, needs to keep everybody topped off and alive. This really felt like I was playing World of Warcraft with some light alterations. The HUD was shockingly close to how I had my HUD set up in WoW. With the keybinds that I messed with, I felt right at home. In the game, you have 2 characters each to pick from their respective roles. I went with Vigor because priests are usually the most straightforward healers in the game. You get big single target heals, maybe a little bit of AoE heals, and probably a damage spell or 2. And that's exactly what he was, pretty straightforward. I had a good time playing through, healing my team, and doing what you'd expect from an MMO dungeon. The gameplay was pretty solid. I felt it was reactive. I never felt like it was clunky to maneuver. It felt like an MMO, which was great because I assume that's what the devs wanted. My only real criticism were the queue times. Even when I was hosting games and calling for people to join, it still took forever. I looked online to see what others were saying, and they echoed that sentiment of the queue times being long, but I was also surprised to see that there were some split opinions amongst the people. One of the most common issues I saw was the disappointment with the lack of customization for the character. There is none. You pick a character who's already established and you play that character. Now, I can see why an MMO player would want to create their own character, because that's a huge draw for these kinds of games. You want to create your own unique character and play them in this established world. So I can see that being a valid criticism, but overall, when this game comes out, I'll probably play it, and I'll probably have a good time with it. Next is Asgard's Fall, or as I call it, not Vampire Survivors. Now, this kind of game is becoming more and more common due to the insane success of Vampire Survivors. I should know, I have over 50 hours in that game. Asgard Fall follows a very similar premise to its inspiration, but with some nice additions to the gameplay loop. You still auto-attack, and you just move around, level up with the currency the enemies drop, and there are so many enemies on the screen that sometimes you can't tell what's happening. So all of the core game mechanics are there. Asgard Fall adds in some nice changes that does make it stand out a little bit. Adding a dodge roll has got to be one of the most drastic changes, so you can quickly react to danger and get the hell out of there if needed. You just hit the enemies with a little bit of parkour and you're good to go. Enemies don't deal contact damage like they do in Vampire Survivors, or at least they don't deal a lot. I couldn't really tell. They all seem to have wind-up attacks. There's this little AoE marker that you need to not be in once it goes off, or you will definitely take damage. Using the dodge roll, you become much harder to kill with that because you can react and avoid much more effectively. In my first run, I was able to make it to the first boss, and yeah, they added full bosses to this game, so that's really cool. And the designs are great. If you're interested in that kind of Nordic Norse mythology, you're gonna enjoy the aesthetic of this game a lot. The other key differences would be the skill tree that you utilize while leveling up. As far as I can tell, these replaced the synergies of Vampire Survivors. So instead of combining different weapons to create stronger ones, you use these nodes of power to buff your character. If you want to make a fire build, for example, you will hunt for nodes that will ignite enemies, make your spells burn for more, that kind of thing. Some of those nodes of power need other nodes around them to activate. So you'll need to be a little bit more careful about where you're placing your buffs, that way you can get the most out of your run. If you like Vampire Survivors, you'll most likely enjoy Asgard's Fall. The Norse theming is great, and if this game interests you, I would say put it on your wish list, because I had a good time with it. And the boss designs are really cool. I made it to the final boss of the first area, the Jormungand, I believe it is, or maybe that's just from RuneScape, I don't remember. And it was a good time. The builds get pretty ridiculous, as you might expect, and yeah, I'll probably end up picking this game up once it officially releases. He is Coming, a game that I downloaded solely based on the cover art because holy shit, this is awesome. Just look at it. It's gorgeous. I had no idea what I would be playing, but I booted up and I was surprised and very happy with what I saw. He is Coming is a roguelike auto battler where you run around this map with a day and night cycle to build up your character's stats. There's health, armor, attack speed, thorns, a bunch of other stuff that you can build around to make your character strong. You find items in chests that are randomly generated, and at the end of this 3-day week, you fight a boss. Those bosses can be seen in the top right corner, so you have a little bit of time to try and prep for what's to come. The gameplay is pretty straightforward, and it's damn fun. I don't play a ton of auto battlers unless you count like Balatro as an auto battler, and TFT of course. But this one was really cool. The art is great, the music was sick, and I quickly found myself trying to make one stat become my entire identity. I wanted to become speed, so I tried to go as fast as possible. I tried making monsters kill themselves on me with thorns. Now, I know I'm not very good at these kinds of games, but I can see myself playing this game a lot and just trying to get farther and farther in. It's the kind of game where I die immediately, I hit new game, and try to use the new items that I just unlocked. That quick restart system is something that I think more roguelikes should have. One great example of that is Balatro. This game fucks so incredibly hard. I think it's one of the best games that came out last year. It's so good. I'm sure most of you have already played Balatro. If you haven't, try it out. It's incredible. But Balatro, whenever you fail a run in it, it just says game over, and then the top option is new run. You click that and you're immediately into a new run, fresh start, no downtime between the runs. When a game just drops you in with little to no information, little to no downtime between runs, it's so easy to sink time into it because you're trying to constantly figure out what the game is teaching you. You're also just trying to constantly improve your runs, use the items that you've just unlocked, see if you can find them. It's a great formula. This game is awesome and I definitely recommend it. I've got this one personally wishlisted. Man, that was hard to say. And I'm looking forward to getting my hands on the full thing. Coming up next, we've got Starless Abyss, a game that I chose because I wanted something with a sci-fi feel in this video. I'm not normally a huge sci-fi fan, with the exception of Warhammer 40k. I tend to lean more towards fantasy over sci-fi, but I wanted to give this one a shot. It is a turn-based roguelike deck builder. It's got all of the fun buzzwords that make an indie game a success. The premise is cool. The occult is being mixed with science. As Earth has fallen, we fight enemies named horrors to eventually kill the outer gods. Very, very sci-fi eldritch horror, which is pretty fucking wild, honestly. I'm enjoying that. And what you get is a very solid experience, I'd say. The art is really, really nice. The gameplay is solid and engaging. But I can't help but feel like this game isn't one for me. There's just something about roguelike deck builders that don't quite do it for me. Maybe it's trauma from when I played Chain of Memories way back in the day on the Game Boy Advance, that it just doesn't feel, for me, as fun or as engaging. Now, that isn't to say that there's anything inherently wrong with these systems, it's just not one that I typically prefer. Except for Balatro. But Balatro didn't feel like a battler as much, like you weren't dealing damage with cards, you were more just making number go up, which is fun. It felt different. I don't know. There was something about it that just didn't feel quite the same. I know that Slay the Spire is one of the most popular versions of this type of game, and I should probably play that. It's in my Steam library, but I haven't gotten around to it yet just because it doesn't really pique my interest. This is by no means to say that Starless Abyss is a bad game, because looking at the Steam reviews, people are really stoked for this one, and it seems like something to keep an eye on. I just don't know if the battling deck building roguelike combination is something that I particularly, maybe not enjoy, but maybe seek out more consistently. I like my roguelikes to be very action oriented. Hades is a great example. Enter the Gungeon's a great example, where you are constantly doing things. Your build is not reliant typically on two aspects of luck, you know, the random buffs that you get plus the random card draw. I don't know. There's just something about it that doesn't quite scratch the itch, but maybe in the future I'll put more time into playing these types of games and maybe I'll appreciate them more later. Last but certainly not least, we've got Everhood 2. I had never seen or heard of Everhood before, but I am seriously considering going back and playing the first one just based off the demo of the second. Off the trailer, this game looks like a fucking trip. So before this continues, if anyone has photosensitivity, you've been warned. This game has tons of bright flashing colors. This is immediately giving me Earthbound and Undertale vibes, so I was instantly sold. I love those games. And what I got did not disappoint. You start with a questionnaire and it asks some pretty personal questions, so I'll just leave it at, eventually my soul color was chosen to be blue, dabba dee dabba die. With my hair fixed, it was time to go see what this game was all about. From the art direction to the musical choices, it felt like I was playing those tongue-in-cheek RPG games like Earthbound. So cool. We meet a raven who tells us that we must find this stone and return it to them, so off we go, but not before we get a demonstration of the gameplay. This shit is bananas. It's like a mixture of a rhythm game and a bullet hell. Two game genres that I'm fucking terrible at. But here we are. It took a little while to get the hang of what the game was asking me to do, but once I got it, I could really see myself playing this to completion. You are then thrown into a new area and wander around fighting new enemies with their own soundtrack unique to them and figuring out which notes you need to absorb for super effective damage. This game already rules. This is the kind of game where you talk to every single NPC, not because they have something vital to the story, but because you just want to see what they're going to say about the situation. And the music? Holy shit, they went in on the soundtrack. This thing bumps, team, let me tell you. There are bosses with new mechanics that get thrown in at you. They keep you on your toes, plus some wild additions like Philosopher Carl Jung, Genghis Khan, and fucking Rasputin. This game is insane. It's all over the place, and it's really, really fun. Makes me want to play the full thing, which lucky for me is out today as of recording this video. So if this is something y'all want to see in the future, let me know, because I'm probably playing this regardless if I make a video or not. So my friends, that was my experience with Steam NextFest. I know this video is coming out a few weeks after it ends, but I really wanted to take my time and challenge myself with a different video style. Plus, life is always so goddamn busy. I know I said I would be streaming soon, and that is still coming, I promise. I'm just trying to figure out what days will work best to dedicate to that so I can have a consistent schedule. Let me know down in the comments if you played any of these games, or if you played any games in the NextFest in general. If so, which ones are you looking forward to personally? Don't forget to let me know what games you'd be interested in me playing, either from this list that I made a video about, or maybe from my entire library as a whole. I'm pretty open to new ideas, and I'm looking forward to hearing from you. But until then, thank you all so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video, and I will see you all later. Goodbye.